All right, welcome everyone. Katie, you want to tell us about this picture that we've added?
Yes. Well, last week we were so fortunate to be able to ride down to the Digital Equity Conference together. And our very first session was with the author of this book, Allison Posey. So we got to meet with her and we were fangirls and we're like, can we take a picture with your book? And she was very excited and it was a great session. So that was the picture of us meeting with the author.
That was so much fun. And
She was
She's amazing.
excited too.
she's
Yeah.
amazing. And I guess she has another book coming out, and we didn't get to hear about that book yet, but it sounds like there's another book coming out from her. And so we were telling her all about all of you and how we're doing this book study. So that was just super fun and great timing for us. Perfect.
And if you haven't had a chance, because we're going to do it pretty quickly here, you'll notice that we're going to talk about the feedback we got last time. But if you could fill out the form that's in the chat, that would be really helpful for us to know how we can support you today. All right, so what we learned is everyone really liked the breakout choices, and that continues to be a positive that we're hearing. We all want more time, right? We know the 45 minutes is a short period for lots of content. We're doing our best to get deep enough, right, and create some options for you. Keeps coming up that we want more resources for later. Tracy, can you click on that site link real quickly so we can talk about that?
Of course.
Will you lead us through what this site has and kind of how it's set up so they know what resources are available ahead of time and also after our sessions?
Me?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a website we have made just for you. So feel super special. This is your website for this book study. And so what we've added for every session, we put in some resources. And so the three of us meet together, and we've also gotten resources from some other spaces, but we get together to figure out what to share with you with the different sessions. And so you'll see, for example, I'm actually going to go down to the one that has the video on
Well,
it.
and I do want to show Tracy like what we put the slides on there early. So
Yes.
that's something that you can know that when those are sent out, you should be able to look at that ahead of time so you know what we're going to talk about.
Yes. So we're getting the other videos added, but what you'll see for each session is a video recording of the session as well as the slide deck. And like Ari said, some learners, it's really helpful to preview materials. So we've been doing this in RPD with our staff. So we want to model the same thing for you, is that you get access to the slideshow days before we meet. So you can look and preview things. And then for each of our sections, we also are just pulling some extra resources that go along with the book. And then you'll see in some of the sessions, we'll actually call some of these materials out. And so you can see some materials for engagement, videos. We try to make sure there's a good sampling of things to read, things to look at, and things to watch and listen to. And there's
Thank
some,
you so much,
yeah, and there's some
Tracy.
items for chapter 5 too. So we'll be referring to some of those pieces later.
Also, as a good reminder, within that site, you can find the slide deck that we have, and each of our breakout sessions have slides that go with those too. So if you're looking for more information going into the slide deck, you'll find those additional pieces. So in case you choose one room, but you're curious about the other, it's a way to get in there. We're going to keep breakout choices. We are going to remember to share access to when we're together to make sure we're sharing resources. And so we added some things to our Padlet for that this time. Also, a suggestion was that today the overview is going to stay in the main room. So if you're choosing to work on your own and look at some of the additional resources versus the book resources or read, you're going to jump into a breakout room. So we're going to change that a little bit so that the main room will be the overview room.
Ari, we did have a question.
There's a question.
Oh, there you go.
There's a question in the chat just asking about how long that site is going to be open.
That is such a great question, Julie. So this is actually attached to a site that I use for my whole staff, Ari and I, and I know Mount Vernon is using some of it too, but we're going to keep this up here. We're not going to get rid of it because you'll see there are additional pages up here for other resources. The thing is, it's kind of a hidden page in here. So at some point, I might bring up a link up here on the top that actually goes to all of our book studies, because I know it's hard to get to some of those hidden pages, but please bookmark this so that you'll have access to it. But I do not plan on taking this down. I plan on keeping this as an access point for everyone. So good question.
If it's current, it'll be there.
Yes. It might change. We might add more things to it as we change our book study.
All right, Tracy, let's move us on.
Yes. Sorry, my little cursor here was having a hard time.
Great. So just to review, our overall goals for this book study is to explore the unlearning cycle and reflect on how this process can help us improve our practice. And then also dig into the fundamental elements and beliefs of the universal design for learning that can then carry over into our classrooms and professional spaces.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. And our goals for this session, we're going to be exploring how and why we need to prioritize engagement for our learners. We're also going to investigate how to encourage some expert learning and also take some time to reflect on our learning. Now, please remember, depending on the session that you pick, it's going to highlight some of these areas. So if you do pick the session that's really focusing on expert learning, you might not get as much of the engagement piece. So know that the resources are there for you to go back to. But just remember that, as especially when you fill out the feedback for us, that depending on what you pick are some of the highlighted goals that will happen.
Great point, Tracy. Thank you. Tracy, do you want to open up that survey links and Katie can go over kind of what we came up with?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So one of the feedback that we got in our last survey was that you wish that we would have provided snacks. So as we are virtual, we know that we can't provide you snacks. So we decided to ask, if you were a snack, which one would you be today? And I'm excited to see that 50% are at 100 grand. We've got a few kind of feeling like popcorn today.
Oh, I love it's changing. Here we go.
I would feel like popcorn. We've got a couple Sour Patch Kids. It's, you know, the week of Halloween, so I can totally understand that as well. So we're sorry we can't provide you with physical snacks, but thank you for giving us your feedback on where you're feeling if you were a snack today.
And feel free to bring it. You can even turn your camera on because I will be drinking my tea. So you can even turn your camera on and have your snack because we love seeing your faces. It's okay if you need a snack.
I brought some Halloween candy, but I can't share it with you. But just know it's here.
Hey,
so if
throw
you
it to me
came
over here.
Okay, I'll put some over the table.
Over the wall.
But we love the humor. Love the humor.
Move us down, Tracy. What else do we have?
Yeah.
All right. And so just one of the things that we really want to make sure when we're thinking about our students and what we're bringing to our classrooms is, you know, how prepared are they for learning today? And how prepared are they for taking in new content, and kind of where are our students at? And that's why we also wanted to model for you just to get a tone of where are you guys at and where are you coming today with your cognitive load and what you're ready for. So we see about 50% of us are hanging in there, ready to listen and learn, but not real ready to talk much. It's a long day. It's a Thursday at the end of the week. We've got quite a few people. Halloween week. We've got quite a few people who are glad to be here, ready to talk a little. And we've got, I believe, one or two people who are pumped and really ready to collaborate. And thank you very much for everybody joining us. And we tried to provide, and we tried to provide sessions that are going to meet all of those needs.
Perfect. Such a valuable practice to talk to your learners, right? Figure out where they are before you start a session.
So we know you all are coming in at different levels, and that's great. We understand that you may have had a chance to already read chapter 4 and 5. You may have just skimmed it. You may have looked at. So just a quick understanding. If you stay in the main room, you're going to be working with Tracy today, and you're going to get an overview. So that's going to be your session where she's going to be doing a lot of the talking. You may have a few interactions, but really it's going to be another way of previewing that information. Chapter 4 is about prioritizing engagement, and Katie's really going to dig into that engagement piece in chapter 4. And that, Katie, you have a document that they're going to be looking at, right? Or a question. They're going to be talking about a question. Is that right?
Yep. We're going to be talking a little bit more about how engagement resonates within their practice.
Great. And chapter 5 is really about becoming an expert learner and changing our practices. And I'm going to be doing some collaborative exploration and chatting with some provoking questions, hopefully. Also remind you guys already have that resource link. If you choose to work on your own, you can go through the resources on your own. You can flip through the slide deck, which I guess you do have access to as well on that resource page. So you can kind of peruse at your own speed, and you'll be jumping into your own room for that if you choose to. We are going to go into this breakout sessions. Last time we said, let's make them a little bit longer. So we're going to spend 20 minutes in this session.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And basically, if you want to have your book out, I'm going to be referring to some pages. So if you want to jump into your book and have Post-it notes ready, I love writing in books and doing Post-it notes. So whatever you are comfortable with, but hopefully we can find some pages that resonated with you. And I know this is a me talk at you overview, but I hope it really isn't. I hope I can get a couple of you to jump in with me on this one as well. But we're going to do a overview of chapter 4 and 5 and get those main points out of there for us. So the first one we're going to look at is chapter 4. And this one, of course, is about prioritizing engagement. And Posey has kind of broken this out into a few sections. Sorry, I'm not sure why my screen is going black on me. There we go. There's a section, the damn segue, little story. Then she has a cognitive load section. There's also one called support cognitive load with engagement. And the reason I kind of bolded and put that one in blue, this is the one where this was a section I felt was like the section in this one that really kind of gave that whole purpose for prioritizing engagement. So I just kind of highlighted that one for you. And then there's a section just on teacher engagement, going back to the unlearning cycle. And then there were some just tips on how to continue your UDL journey. So those are the sections that we're going to be looking at together. Okay. All right, so this first one, I love that Posey and Novak love to embed stories, right? And it really resonates with me, and we know with brain research and with learners, telling people these little relatable stories can solidify learning, right? We know that, and even in PD, when we look at great PD that has that like engaging story, can just be that pivotal thing for people where that's how you remember is embedded in that story. So hopefully you remember that story where she is talking about how Posey went on this tour on a Segway in Washington, D.C., and how horrifying it was for her because unlearning how to drive, driving that Segway was so different than anything she's driven before. And so she just had this real moment of cognitive overload, right? Where she literally couldn't even finish the tour. And that really helped her think about this whole unlearning cycle. So there is, right at the beginning of that chapter, pretty short, but I think a really powerful, just bringing that to a real story for us. So I did like that one. And just how challenging unlearning can become. And how unlearning and then thinking about how we can make unlearning more successful for us. So that was that first section. All right. And then on page 40, we jump into the cognitive load piece. And this one to me is very interesting because I don't think we realize how much we do this to our students, to ourselves, right? And just this idea of putting this pressure and overload on ourselves, what it does to any capacity we have to learn. Give me a thumbs up or wave. Have you ever experienced cognitive load lately? And you're, oh my gosh, yes, Marley, what happened? What was going on for you?
I just feel like I'm only in my second year teaching and we have a new principal this year. So I'm just
It's every moment cognitive overload, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's a lot of information all the time.
I think it's so valuable for us to really internalize how that feels for us as an adult, even with all the skills, right? And coping and all these pieces that we have in place for ourselves, and how real it is for all of our students and how much they're actually going through that all the time, right? That we often don't even think about the cognitive load we're putting on our students, right? Where one example they talk about is just that directions and supports, I give them in one way that's comfortable for me, and I'm not giving them in a way that's accessible for students. So maybe I just told you some directions and I could have like, that just doesn't resonate with you, or you can't remember that, or you just need to see them, or you need images. And so now my capacity to do something I might have been able to do quite easily, I can't even access it, right? Because just the way it was introduced didn't match what I need. So just realizing those things that we do with our students. Or for example, I was meeting with a high school team this morning, and they were talking about note taking and how their students are so bad at note taking. And so then we started unpacking, what is note taking? How many barriers are there? And just the skills that we started to just unpack that someone would need to do to take notes in class, it was just crazy, right? We actually used AI. There's a great AI tool, Goblin Tools, that actually allows you to unpack any skill into all the discrete parts of the skill. And it was like 50 things just to do note taking, right? So remembering those kinds of things as we think about cognitive load, and then how quickly your emotions are, how much your emotions are tied to cognition, right? And to me, that's always so powerful, that if I'm just not ready, or I don't feel safe, or I have other things going on, my capacity for learning can be so impaired, right? So that cognitive load is described as effort it takes to actually complete something, and how many barriers we can just so unintentionally, right, leave in place or cause ourselves. So this page was actually super powerful as I really think about UDL. So then this next piece on page 41, she goes into a section talking about how we can support cognitive load with engagement. And this is the piece that seems so powerful to me, that when we really think about cognitive load as a barrier and how it can be a barrier for our students, we can completely unpack just the experience for students and make and make that engagement so powerful and accessible for everyone. So I love how they talk about that. Sorry with my screen here. Come on. They talk about how making sure our lessons and activities are relevant for students, right? That totally makes sense. And it's the same with our adult learners, right? If we're doing this PD or doing a class for our staff, if it doesn't feel like it's relevant, I'm just done. I'm just not even engaged at all. And then there's that safe piece where I feel like I belong and I can take risks. And then the choices that I have for materials, that they're accessible to me. I have them translated if I need them. I have them in audio. So having those pieces where I can really attend to engagement that will take down barriers to that cognitive load piece, I think was really powerful that she describes in this section. And then I love, oh my gosh, this idea of, and it's on page 42, that engagement is not about a fun meter. When I first started talking to our staff about engagement, they're like, I can't be any more entertaining. There's nothing, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not the stand-up comic. But it's not about making things more fun or gamified or any of those pieces. It's about really making sure the students have the opportunity to engage in learning, to be ready to learn. So recruiting their interest, and there's that relevant piece, making them feel like they're part of the learning, working on that sustaining effort and persistence, and giving them those coping skills and self-regulation. So engagement isn't about fun, it's about opening up learning that students can really partake in. And I love that spin on it, because there really are some teachers that think it needs to be this fun, entertaining game, and that's not what learning has to be. Okay, now on page 42, and I talked about this one on page 42 as well. At the bottom of the page, she has this bulleted list. So it starts with, like, down on the bottom of the page, there's 2 bullets, and then the third bullet is on the top of page 43. I love these questions. Take a look at these ones. And I put them right in the slideshow for you if you happen to not have your book. But how do we find relevant examples for students, ways for students to make choices, and options to minimize threats? I mean, this goes right to, you're just asking yourself these questions as you're designing, right? Just super powerful. That's second one. How do we invite students to make goals salient for them, right? Bring them into the goal setting process with us. Make sure those goals are translated in student language, shared in a variety of ways so those goals become real to them. Vary our resources, foster collaboration. One of my favorites, dear to my heart, is that whole feedback loop. And you can see it, how we have really taken that to heart in this book study with you. But feedback and responding to it in a real feedback loop, students feel so part of the lesson and part of the design if you actually do that authentically. And then how do we promote expectations for all students, that all students can learn, presuming that competence of every child, no matter what program they seem to have attached to them, and facilitate that coping and reflection. And one thing, working with my high school crew that I have, when I talk to them about how strategies I have for coping or ways that I do learning, it really resonates with them, right? That's really a powerful piece. They're also on page 43, it's the middle paragraph in there. It actually gives actually a couple paragraphs in there. It actually gives a classroom description, and it shares how a teacher actually is starting some of those pieces. So you might want to dog ear that page or look at that one, because you'll have your staff that say, what does it look like? There's kind of a nice description on that page 43 that you might want to look at, where it talks about how the teacher does provide choice for something, or how they're providing that collaboration. So I know examples are super powerful. All right. On page 44, we talk about the teacher engagement with UDL, and this is really that reflection piece. So as we're looking at this whole book as a reflection for us on our practice, it kind of talks about where you could be with your learning, right? And reminding you that when you first get into UDL, and I remember a couple years, the first book I read, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so time consuming. This is not going to be a reasonable ask for anyone. And that's where I was at the first, just realizing this time and the focus that it takes. But now I've started to see that it is more of a mindset shift than anything else. And it's really interesting that when I first started looking at it, it was like, okay, give me the list. What are the 2 things I need to do? Or what does this look like? What does this look like? And then it became, oh my gosh, it's not about any of those things. It's about how I look at every lesson with this new lens of just, oh, I see another barrier. And you'll just start to see it everywhere. Oh, I see a barrier here that I could address. It's a different mindset. It simply becomes part of everything that you do. It becomes, you reevaluate every routine that you have in your classroom. You start thinking about resources and how to make them accessible, and just creating like a bank of choices for students, and finding that way of how students can share options, where you just start building skills in them, that they learn how to make videos, so that anytime they could do a quick video for you. They learn how to use all those like Google Read Write tools, so they have them just in their back pocket, right? So building that skill set, and it becomes, the load just seems to change, right, of what that shift is. So page 44 can be a powerful piece if you're in that spot now where, oh my gosh, this just seems like way more work than a benefit. On page 47, that's this continuing your journey. This is the 4th stage in unlearning, but remember, you might not have even tried anything in your room yet. But Posey does share that this can be a stage where teachers are kind of trying things and just trying to see what's going on. Sometimes they do experience a true shift in what they're doing at this point. Sometimes they might be in a spot where I kind of tried something, but it failed, and now I just need more experiences. But the big point to remember is, do not give up yet. This does feel like hard work, but it comes with such a benefit that it's so worth it. Remember to give yourself grace and just working at your own pace. And a big, powerful piece for me was finding people I could talk to about it. So doing things like these book studies, right? Finding other teachers that are either where you are or trying or somewhere on this journey too, so you can share those pieces with each other, is super powerful. Teachers will often isolate themselves. It's pretty common, right? We'll just get in our room and do our thing, right? Does that sound familiar? Have you done that? And you might go all day and you've not seen another adult all day long. We need to make sure we're not doing that to ourselves. We have to build these supports around and with each other. Okay. So that was chapter 4. Did you like that one? Was that a pretty solid chapter? I'm seeing a couple of head nods. Just engagement to me, like, if you don't have students engaged, you might as well not do anything else. So remember, that is that pivotal piece, right, of getting those students so that they even are ready for learning before we can move on. All right, this next one is about expert learners, and I am going to need to go a little bit faster. We've got just a little over 5 minutes on this one. But in this one, the sections are another story again. So I love this, how they're talking and relating it to baking. And then a section on setting high expectations. And I should have made the Reignite the Pilot Light my blue one, because I think that was the highlight one for me. There's also a section on student autonomy. And then again, notes for you, like in every single chapter, on how to keep fueling you on continuing your UDL journey. So let's jump in here and take a peek. All right, so this first one, we're on page 53 now, about this baker story that she has, right? So it starts on page 52, 53. And she does this great images. If you look at the images on there where it's talking about equity and in a situation where everyone has exactly the same tools. And then that's equality, excuse me. And then we go to equity where I make sure you have a higher stool, or maybe you have a little more access. Maybe I translate something for you. But then the third one is expert learning, which is really amazing, because then it's more about what is that individual need? How can they engage more fully? And how are they the bakers, not the watchers? And I love that, because in the other two, they're simply bystanders in this situation of watching something. But that focus is, how do we get students doing the work? Because we know whoever's doing the work and the talking and the doing is doing the learning, right? If you're sitting by the side, the chance that passivity is not going to help you engage and do the learning. So I love that focus on the attention needs to be on the engagement of the students and the involvement. And this chapter does call out the 3 principles that are big with UDL, which that guide our lesson design and our attention to barriers. And it's, of course, engagement, which we talked about in that last chapter. And then there's representation, which is the content. It's how I get that content to everyone. And then the action and expression is then how students are able to demonstrate what they know. And so it really brings in those, describing those 3 for us. Okay. On page 56, we jump into a section on setting high expectations. And this was one that especially my high school, not high school and middle school, not my elementary, but my high school teachers were super concerned that if we do UDL, it means lowering our standards, because I'm just going to make everything easy, right? And if I have these easy choices, kids will always pick these easy choices and they're going to opt out of the high rigorous pieces. But we have to remember it's not about that. It's your expectations are those high leverage goals that you're making for your students are set on standards. You do not change the goal. And it's making sure that your expectations for students, no matter what, are high expectations, right? And we know that expectations can really cloud, right? Because I can develop an expectation and then I start treating student groups a certain way. And then, of course, the way I treat them, the students are actually influenced by that and their achievement is influenced by that. So having those high expectations for all students, no matter of program, no matter of disability, they are all able to reach greatness and all, of course, able to become expert learners. And expert learners, we're not born that way. We must become that way. So making sure we're not teachers of content, we're teachers of expert learning. So that on page 58, it really outlines what we must help students become. And the student autonomy we know is super powerful, helping students know their own goals and anticipate their own variability. So looking at that on page 60, sorry, now I'm flying here at the end. And then it really talks about, again, continuing your unlearning. Again, keep experimenting, not giving up. And I love this. Don't try to do UDL, right? But consider what it means to think about UDL in your design. It's not like I UDL'd that, I'm all good. It's more of just in my design itself, how does that framework and those ideas help me consider barriers, consider those different instructional moves that I need to make. Those are those powerful pieces.
We will start out with chapter 4. So chapter 4, we got to share just a couple quotes that kind of resonated with us throughout the reading, and how closely engagement is tied to emotions, and how we need to be aware of our cognitive load and what students are bringing with us. Do we have anyone? We had some good discussion. We had some good aha questions of, I'm already doing some of these engagement pieces and connecting with my students in that way and meeting them where they're at. Athena, would you mind? I don't mean to call you out. You can say no. Athena, would you mind sharing your experience that you had with a student today?
Sure, I can do that. So I was telling my group that I teach at a non-traditional school. I teach at a mental health facility day treatment program for youth trying to transition them back to their home schools. But we were practicing typing today on our computers. And I had a student that came to me and said, I just have a lot going on in my head. Like I have a lot of things on my mind right now. I can't focus on the typing that we're supposed to be doing because we just use typing.com. And I asked him, well, can you open up a doc and type out what's going on in your mind, like what's in there as a way to get it out? Because it's still practicing our typing, you know, even if it's not the exact typing that we're doing. And he was like, well, yeah, I can do that. We finished our lesson and he got to the end and he was like, thank you so much for letting me do that. It really helped.
See, that's awesome, Athena.
Thank you for sharing. Chapter 5, Ari, do you have something to share from your group?
I had two wonderful participants, Michelle and Val. Are either of you willing to share something? You were talking about how you adapting and sharing things for everyone.
We talked about one of the challenges being that a lot of gen ed teachers don't want everybody to have access to the modified materials or modified ways of accessing. And they think it's, lesser than. That's my struggle right now is how do we help that mindset change?
So we talked about, that process of needing to unlearn this idea that it's not cheating to say, oh, today I need to do it a little bit differently if they're still meeting that goal, right? And also we want to see growth in all students. So if we're not seeing growth, if we see people flattening out, no matter what level they're at, we're going to push them. We're going to say, hey, why don't you try this other thing? Because I didn't see the last few days, I haven't seen you. Can you try that? Or as Athena said, right, you can still get to that by still typing and using those words. Is there anything else? We had such great conversations, I thought. Michelle?
The other thing we talked about was as a teacher, like I was leading a WA-AIM training today, and one of the teachers was saying, like, why even really do WA-AIM? Like, my kids are too low. They're not even going to pass any of it. What's the point? And if that's the mindset that we're going into, that like, why try? That's not holding our students to that high expectation. And so that rubs off on the students. And how is that going to affect what they truly can do versus going, I don't know how high they can go, but we're going to see mentality of like, we're going to try and get here. Even if they get here, we're still making progress towards that high mark. So that was.
And you talked about specifically with that, removing barriers too, right? So switching the idea from what my kids can and can't do to what barriers can I remove so they can be successful on it. And I guess the last thing I want to tie in that I think was a great one is we did some would you rathers, and we noticed that depending on the situation, our expert learning and our expertise would change on what we chose to do. So having choices within that moment could really help us be more successful. All right, we shared a lot. Thank you.
Tracy, did you have anything you wanted to share out, or are we just going to capture that in the recording?
Well, ours was so awesome. You're going to have to go back and watch that recording. But the one thing I remember that I love and that we brought up is that engagement is not a fun meter. It's not about gamifying your room. So just have that in the back of your head, that it's not that you are more entertaining. So that's something I wanted to remind everybody. But watch that video. It was awesome. All right, let's jump to our next piece.
So we're going to, last time we talked about on the Padlet. So we're going to take 2 minutes of silence for you to reflect on the questions above. One thing that has resonated with you so far in your learning about UDL. It can be from today, or it can be from any of our sessions. Okay. Setting goals or changing your practice. So thinking about what's resonating with you that you think is like, what's something you're unlearning? What's something that's resonating with you? And then what's one thing that you will do before our next meeting that you're going to think about or try? So take 2 minutes and jot that down. Think about it before we go to the Padlet link. 2 minutes starting now. What we're going to do in this time is if you could please either, and there's a lot of different tools on a Padlet, right? It has a lot of universally designed tools, speak, type, add images, add a GIF, whatever it might be. But we also would ask that you would respond to at least 2 people with that what's resonating with you. And then we're going to have a little bit of time to talk about that too, because we know that everyone in this is a resource. So if you're feeling like you can't turn on your camera and respond, going ahead and typing that in. Thank you, Tracy.
So many great comments in here, guys. And I I love this one, this vulnerability of one thing I want to do is reread chapters. I'm feeling I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with all the information. Please, that's exactly where you should be, right? It is a lot to process, you're right. And give yourself that grace and chance to do that because it is a lot at first.
And
right?
Tracy, I added to that too, because I agree with that. This is like my 5th time reading this book, and I've led the book study 3 times.
I've done
And
it 3
every time
times.
I was like, before I'm like, oh my God. And like, if you look at my book,
Yeah.
there's different colors. Katie was laughing at it was like, I had notes and then I had re-highlighted other parts of it
Oh, my
to remind myself,
stickies all stuck
oh
everywhere.
yeah, I got to do that. Like, this is a lot. Like, that's why it's unlearning. To unlearn is harder to learn than learning sometimes, right? Because we are, not only are we learning something new, we are rewriting our neurons in our brain and different ways and thoughts of patterns, right? And going against a lot of things that we've been practicing. So we're breaking habits. That's a tough thing to do. And it's a lot coming at us to try to categorize it and put it into place.
Well, think of how, well, maybe it's just me. Think of how long you've been in school, or, I mean, my whole life has been either in a school as a student or a teacher. And I did not get to participate in learning like this as a student, right? And so really challenging those things. You're right, Ari. It is so tough to do that. Are you ready to go back to our slideshow?
Yeah, and Tracy, there's a great question, and I think that
in chat or on
no, on the last one, does anyone have any resources supporting students to make good fits and choices? And maybe do you want to show that resource that's on our resource site that has a bunch of different things for kind of
I have something for that. There's like an amazing resource. Okay, I'm writing this down. Whoever put that, we're going to add that to
we'll come back another time and we will. So look back at the Padlet because we'll link a couple things that we've been working on.
Because that is, that is so key, because it's a lot of times a big misconception with UDL is it's just about offering a bunch of choices for students and then, you're done. But it's not. It's like super intentional choices. And I remember hearing Katie talk about like there's a sweet spot of a number of choices that's actually appropriate.
Katie Novak versus Katie Dorr.
Yeah, Katie and Katie Dorr says the same thing.
I said that actually in my small group presentation. So you were right on.
And then if you have students that aren't used to choices, oh my gosh, more than 2 at first can be just heads explode, right? Yeah. So there are some resources on helping students learn how to make choices and how to reflect on them and how to make that super purposeful, where teachers will say they're just going to choose the easy one. No, that doesn't have to be the thing. So
we are just a couple minutes past our time, yeah, I know, sorry. I'm bossy today.
Can somebody put the feedback link in there? Because
yes, we can.
Our next thing is to please give us feedback. The thing that I love is when we're with a group for a few times, we find the things that really resonate with you, but we want to find out if that's still the case, right? We have another session. We have one more. We have more book studies though. You're going to have to do more with us, but please fill out the feedback. Remember, the goals for our session are also in there, but please take a moment and let us know what worked, what didn't work, how we can make these, because these are your sessions, not ours. Tell us how we can make these even better. I think that was me, or did I just talk over somebody?
I think you're great. So it sounds
we might
great,
be at our cognitive load too,
yeah.
So it's okay.
Katie, this is you.
There we go. On that note, as you guys are wrapping up and filling out that survey, and as Tracy said, we really do look at those as we plan for our next sessions to say what can we change, what can we modify, what can we do different, because these are sessions for you and we want to meet your needs. And so we are hoping that you will join us for chapter 6 on November 16th.
You don't want to miss that one. We haven't planned it yet, but I know it's going to be awesome.
It will be, I'm sure.
And I do want to say, jumping back into those resources that Tracy gave, if you look at it, one of them, there's it says resource bank. So she'll add some, but also if you click on there, there's a bunch of different things about choosing options, and even from primary to high school options for it. So
which one are you highlighting, Ari?
So the UDL resource bank expert learners. If you
go
up
down, here?
No, down. Yeah. Well, that would be one. Yes. I linked it as well right there. I think right there. Yeah.
Yes. So that one goes to this expert learner page. And so, yeah, it's a whole bunch of just expert learners.
But there's a section in there where teachers have put a bunch of different. Oh, that wasn't the one. We'll find it.
It's engagement.
Yeah.
So if you look down at engagement, which that was one of the chapters we talked about. There's a whole bank of samples and examples that our teachers have helped us build of how they're actually pulling off engagement in their classroom. So
and helping them make good choices.
And we're going to talk more about this on the moving forward, our last section together of taking action.
For those of you that are ready to go, we totally understand. Those of you that want to stop and just talk about UDL practices and what you saw in the session, please stay on.
So good to see everyone. All right, so what strategies did you notice? We did try a few. And you can unmute yourself or you can throw it in chat. Which
one are you seeing repeated? Like there's some we've been repeating.
Mm-hmm. Some of my favorite ones. What are you seeing?
I was going to say the flexibility, like during our session, you had like certain things planned and certain slides, but then the conversation changed that to an extent. And so there were some slides we skipped through to reach more important ones. So not being stuck to like, we have to only be focused on what our plan was, but being able to be flexible with that.
Nice. That is a great point.
Flexible thinking and learning. Yay, I saw that in there. So yeah, quiet reflection. Were there people that went into the quiet reflection room?
Or the one, I think they're also talking about the right before the Padlet, Ari.
Okay.
And that is so hard. Oh my gosh. I actually turned my mic off and I'm like, Ari, did you set a timer? I think we're way past time. She's like, no, Tracy, it's only been 1 minute. But I am the worst. I always had to have a timer when I had my own first grade classroom. I like literally would just set my timer up. We're going to take 2 minutes to do this. And it seems like a lot of time, but yeah, that was super powerful.
I think one of the big one is a resource bank, because the truth of the matter is people that are ready to dig into things, right? Whether they're ready, they need to repeat or they want to go farther, having that available. And it takes time to put it together, but Tracy gets to pull, right, from NKD, like we're pulling things we already use other times. So once you start building that bank, you have that toolbox to be able to use over again.
Yes, we actually talked about that, and Ari and I did training today for 6th grade, and just having that idea of I might not be ready for it right now, but if I know on that resource bank I can get back to it, right? I might table it for right now with my cognitive load, but I know where I can go. I know there's this website with all of those things. It's there when I need it. Yep.
And I think that's huge for our students too, because in a lot of times when they come to our classes, you know, and we were talking, they may have had a fight with their best friend right before they walked into the classroom, and they're very distraught, and emotions play a huge role in their cognitive ability and their readiness to learn for that day. And so maybe if they were there and they were present, but did they learn anything? Maybe not. So maybe if they had a video to go home and watch, or something that they could go home and review, so they could still get the concepts of the lesson when they were ready for it. But giving that resource bank for those learners who may not be ready in that moment during that 5th period class that you had today, but might be ready a little bit later after they've had time to be home and are in their safe place.
That's perfect. And they might need more time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving thinking about these strategies too for when we have meetings. You know, all the different kinds of meetings we have, staff meetings or other meetings. Sometimes we just barrel ahead and forget about some of these things, but they're just as effective in those type of settings too.
Tracy and I talk about that a lot. It's a conversation that's really near and dear to my heart, and Tracy seems to agree, so that's good. But that we have to model that, right? We often do not give adult learners, we just expect they're expert learners. And then we're frustrated because we always talk about teachers being like the worst audience, but part of that is because we do not actually create a lot of opportunities for flexibility within those pieces. So
no,
if we're
we
going to
build cognitive load on top of cognitive load for all of our people, right?
And we're asking gen ed teachers, any teacher, anyone in our system to like make changes. But if we can't start to model that and realize the impact and what it takes to do it, and that it takes time, right? It takes time out of your meeting to take a break.
Yeah.
And it takes time out of your meeting to give that quiet think time. And I think that's something that's so important that we often don't do, especially with other professionals, is we'll ask the question and then now turn to your partner and talk about it. And, you know, there are some that just like that processing time to really think about what is it and where is it that I stand before having to listen to where somebody else is.
No, that's super powerful, because if we aren't modeling it in all of our PD, like even our staff meetings and everything, it has to be modeled everywhere. It's so important.
Our actions show our belief, right? It's exactly what Michelle brought back up too, right? If we aren't showing that to our students, if we aren't showing that to our staff, if we aren't honoring that, then what does that really tell them?
And I know that is a training layer. I mean, it's a training layer for our admin. It's a training layer for all of our, like, we have all of our coaches, like fill in the math coach, literacy coach, right? If everyone is an instructional coach, and those are pieces like Ari and I with our tech lens, we're instructional support, right? We just happen to have a focus on, and Katie, or happen to have a focus on technology pieces, but we are instruction. And if we're not modeling those all the time, the technology, just throw it out the window. It's not going to make any difference without that purposeful use of whatever the thing is that you're sharing.
Any other questions for those that are still on, or things that are jumping out at them before we wrap up today?
I was thinking of cognitive load that we don't even see because it's not right in our session. I was working with some gen ed teachers this week, and they brought up, I'm coached by this expert, then this specialist come in, then this one comes in. And it maybe is not a cognitive overload in your time, your session or time with them, but it's the compounded cognitive load.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the point too, Katie was making, right? That connection for students, like it's all the stuff layered up on top of it, right?
But if we get our specialists and our coaches, and that's kind of where we're at right now, because Burlington's a year ahead of where we're at, but trying to get our coaches on board. So so when you speak to the multilingual specialist, you speak to your instructional coach, we're all using the same vocabulary. We're all using the same, so we've all have the same beliefs in what we believe is true for our learners. And we're all talking with the vocabulary and through the lens of UDL, not through the lens of these kids and these kids and these kids, but what do all of our kids need and what supports can we design to help all of our students? And so really trying to get that foundational understanding with all of our instructional coaches.